Our next speaker is Murray Fulton. He is a director and advisor from Advantage Business. They describe themselves as a business consulting company specialising in providing advice, mentorship and the consulting services to businesses in New Zealand. Murray previously spoke at our 2014 Regional AGM. Today Murray will cover succession planning and the processes that you need to go through to get your business ready for a future sale. Put your hands together for Murray, please.
All right, well look, tonight I'd just like to run through an area which is quite difficult for a number of people and quite simple for others. The term succession planning, maximising your investment, is around another couple of terms, succession and succession planning. So let's just get back to basics in terms of what we're actually talking about. Selling down a business that's any kind of profession, and you guys certainly are professionals, is a very different kettle of fish from, say, selling a company, say maybe a distribution business, and I just want to start with that. My own experience, it's probably relevant to tonight's presentation, is around both the professions and also businesses. So here's an example which I'd like to sort of set up first of all. First question you have to ask yourselves is, first of all, have you actually got a business? And if you have got a business, what's it worth? And if you're not sure, what's the context of that? In terms of the professions, for example, accounting, law, architecture, engineering, in the end, those professions generate fees. Less expenses equals some kind of profit. Taking accounting for a moment, just because it's fairly well established in that area, your average chartered accounting practice, in one way, if it's well organised, which I'll explain in a moment, it's probably going to sell for, say, between 80 cents and $1 a fee. So if you've got a block of fees of $1 million, it may be able to sell for, say, $800,000 to $1 million. It'll sell for that kind of money if it's got leverage, which I haven't yet defined. Just on that, that's people to do work usually on salary, where the owners don't do so much direct work. If there are well-documented systems, if there's a brand that people recognise, if all those things are in place, then somewhere probably around the 80 cents to $1 mark may well occur. However, just to give you an idea of challenges, the entire chartered accounting industry, for want of a better term, or profession, has been not decimated, but they're very concerned about Xero, because Xero has cut a swathe through their revenue. 30 years ago, 20, 30 years, 40 years ago, you had a thing called Business Accounting Services, BAS, which was, say, 5,000 or 6,000 clients, or 500 or 1,000 clients doing tax returns each year. And now a lot of that work is actually done by Xero. So when we look at you people and your view of whether you have a business or not, the first thing you need to actually think about is what your annual revenue is. What actually is it? And the next thing is whether you're doing the work only, defined as the client work, or if you've got other people assisting you. And so I'll follow these slides, but I just want to get out now. I'll give you an example. So you've got, say, a distribution company at $10 million revenue. It's been operating for 20 years. It makes $1 million profit, which is 10% of its revenue. And it trades for what's known as a multiplier, which is really complicated in one way and really simple in another. For a company like that, the multipliers are about 5 times profit. So that business would trade at a sale price of somewhere around about $4.5 to $5 million. With a good tax accountant, quite legitimately, that's probably tax-free. That's a one-off gain. It's the gold at the end of the rainbow, the pot of gold, and that can be sold down over time. A business like that has a brand. It has obviously a business, 10 million odd in revenue, for example, and it's tangible. It'll have systems, it'll have people doing things. Contrast that with a profession. A profession I define as a person or group of people that bill clients for professional services. A profit multiplier for something like a chartered accounting practice or for your practice, for a whole range of reasons, just isn't going to fly. So the next thing to grasp is to say, well, in the end, as much as I may love me and my clients and my business, I'm simply a stream of cash. That's actually what I am. Every business is. And if I stop working, there's no revenue, there's no value. So some people will talk about the real world versus the professions, which is not a very pleasant way of looking at things. The professions are just as valid as anything else. But if your business, if your practice is simply you or some mates billing, and it stops when you stop, then in many ways you may not have a business unless you would be able to migrate that revenue stream to some other people, and they may be prepared to pay some money for it. So succession is a term. It's selling or selling down a business. Selling down a business is just a progressive process. I might add, when I go through all of this, the easier way is I'll sod it or just shut the business down. But the problem with that, of course, is if there was value there, it's just gone down the toilet. Unfortunately, a number of people do that because this all seems a little bit hard. Hopefully after tonight I may give you one or two pointers to show you that it's not so difficult. So how do we plan to sell or sell down our business? I might add across New Zealand, and certainly the SME sector, and I define that as about 80 million revenue and below. It starts usually at around about, say, 300,000 or 400,000 revenue and all the way up. The baby boomer bubble, which has been well documented, people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, etc., sometimes hang on in their business for either longer than they should, or they love it so much that they want to be taken out of somewhere in a box. So one or two observations in terms of what we find when looking at these areas. Quite often an owner will have a price in their head of what their business is worth, and they don't always get it. And an exit plan means obviously saying to yourself, well, when I have to finish or want to finish in my business, how am I actually going to exit it, sell it for value? And the starting early and grooming pays is almost an oxymoron. It's applied common sense. There's a direct relationship between this and price. Somebody who's never looked at this before and has to sell in a few months probably isn't going to do too well. But also it can be put in the too hard basket. There are a whole raft of emotional factors here at play in terms of saying, well, sod it, I'll just carry on as long as I can, versus, well, it's really myself and some mates and we've got together, and how could we ever trust anybody else? So there are a whole range of emotional issues, not numeric issues, to go through. So it is worth remembering that there are some common mistakes made. I feel like I'm boxed in over in the corner here, but apparently I have to stay here for the audio. So if you're Joe Blow & Co. or John Smith and known as John Smith, within the minds of any purchaser, the first thing they'll be thinking about is, well, this is a person-specific business. There is no longevity after that. Whereas if you called yourself Brown Paper Bag, even though it may be the same, and I'm sure there is a business called that, the whole point of that is to start to put forward a proposition that the person isn't the business. This is not artifice, it's actually a mind game in your head. And in the end, you write the rules. But when it comes to actually persuading somebody else to part with their hard-earned for your business, these are the sort of things they'll be thinking about. Now, if you do have some employee shareholders or some people who have a stake in the business and you're looking to sell down and they're not, then there can be a whole range of conflicts there and a whole range of opportunities. Looking at it positively, that person or people may be the obvious people to sell to if they're prepared to pay reasonable value. But if they're not, there can be issues. The other thing that we find in too many cases is either within the professions or within non-professional services businesses, when the question is asked, what is your business worth? Have you ever had it valued? The answer is, well, usually it's, well, I think it's worth X, but I've never had it valued. Most of the people in this room would own property, possibly multiple properties, and I'm sure most, if not all of us, have had that property or those properties valued, sometimes under duress, sometimes so that we know what we're worth, sometimes to get bank finance most commonly. So a business is an asset in a similar way, even though it doesn't seem to be like a house. So employee shareholders can be a plus or a minus, or people who have got a stake in your business. It's quite common in professional services to have contractors because they're not an overhead and they provide value for as long as the business wishes to have them around. If you do have some key people and you are paying them salaries and wages, or salary or wages, and they're not interested in being part of the business if you sell it, then that's a problem. The way to solve it is to either be open with these people and bring them along on the journey, or to actually sell to somebody who doesn't need them. Then you're in the moral dilemma of how much of their keeper you are. So again, we get back into the emotional area. The last 2 points are quite important. All businesses nowadays run on systems. It can be as simple as having some cloud-based systems that we subscribe to run our business in various ways, or having it could be CAD software, or all sorts of things. But in the end, these systems are going to help us, or are helping us, earn money. And if it is as simple as I've just explained, then it can be quite straightforward in terms of a purchaser to explain how all those work, particularly if it's a professional. But if the systems are more complex, then somebody buying a business needs to understand how they work. One of the factors of getting a better price, that is the 80 cents or $1, or I've seen up to $1.50 actually for chartered accounting practices, is when systems are well documented and they can be seen to be a little bit of a money-making process, as opposed to, well, everything's in my head, I am the system, and by the way, I'm walking out the door. If customers identify, this is a really good one actually, if customers identify with you and in the end they say, well, look, Murray, you're an architectural designer, you're called Green Door, but actually, buddy, it's you, and the only person I deal with is you, and if it's somebody else not interested, then if I say to myself, well, I've got a scalable business called Green Door, I'm kidding myself, because actually it's Murray Fulton's clients. And that makes any kind of sale price or any kind of transition quite difficult. Has anyone got any questions around that area or any other area at this point? I'm actually trying to get through these slides and hopefully have a little bit of interplay. Am I making any sense so far? Well, that's good. That's a start. Now, who here would say, would be brave enough to stand up, and I'm sure you don't have to stand up, but show of hands, anybody here would feel they've got a really fantastic grasp of digital marketing and everything it means and how it can help their business? Is anyone prepared to put their hand up? Fantastic. I see one or two brave souls saying yes. I'll admit personally, it both scares me and excites me, personally, I've got a certain resource assisting in this area. What I would say is that, unfortunately, there have been some rules put forward by multi-billion-dollar brands globally, which we all have to actually subscribe to. And what are those rules? Well, I'll just give you an example of a different industry just for a couple of minutes to give you a feel for that. It happens to be in welding. The welding industry is an interesting industry, and it's full of one-man bands, not too many one-woman bands. Most women aren't stupid enough to be a welder at the moment, although that might change. And some large corporates and one or two smart players. So one of the smart players went to about 30 tired, advanced years baby boomers and said, "What do you want for your business?" And they said, "Well, 150 grand would be great. How about 150? And that seemed to be the going rate. So what they actually did was they purchased 20 of these businesses, and they said, look, Fred or Jim, have we got a deal for you? We won't pay you 150, we'll pay you 250. And we'll pay you 250 over 5 years because we're such nice people." So were they nice people? Well, the people involved were pretty happy with 250. But then they went home and asked their other halves the key question, which was, "Did you marry me for lunch as well as breakfast and dinner?" And in most cases, they were told they weren't married for lunch. So they came back and said, "Well, we've got a bit of a problem here. Quite like the 250, not the 150. But I wouldn't know what to do with myself. And by the way, the other half told me I better not be under her feet at home, so I've got to have something to do. So what would you suggest?" And these people were quite inventive. They said, "Well, actually, we've got a deal for you as well, now that you've said that. We have a maintenance business, and we've got all this old machinery, etc." And they knew, they didn't disclose, but they knew that the gross margin in that business was very high. It was actually about 70% gross margin, not markup. That's almost, I hear, not actually knowing, but that's almost what drug dealers get, I'm told, although they have certain other costs as well. So it was sort of like an old boys sort of aged kindergarten, where these guys would come in for wages. And the funny thing was, and everybody knew this and everyone was fine, the business paying the 250 over 5 years, these guys actually paid for their own businesses. But nobody lost. Now, that's a true story. And the company I did some work with. But as I say, nobody lost. So the thing here is, coming back to what's the point of all that with this? Well, every one of those people said, "Well, we just wait for the phone to ring." Marketing? What's marketing? We don't know what this marketing stuff is. We just know a few people, and we have good years when the phone rings and not so good when the phone doesn't ring, and up economic cycles, etc. So the cut through on all of this is that in the world we now live in, with the internet and Google, etc., when people want a service, somewhere in 24 hours in their life they'll actually Google, or they will search, and they will search with an open heart and mind and a massive amount of cynicism, but they're very interested. So this whole digital marketing thing is keying into that. That's what it's actually about. So we've got all these wonderful terms like content-rich website. Well, what that means is that there are enough images and videos and diagrams to make the complex simple. I'm sure you've all heard that any website nowadays that isn't connected up to be able to be easily and effortlessly seen on a smartphone is dead. Google certainly got into that a few years ago, and the ranking, it's called SEO, search engine optimization. The ranking matters, because when anybody searches, if you're not towards the top of the first page, no one ever looks at the second page. They don't look at the millionth page. You've got to be there. That's the SEO part. Social media, quality, not what you had for lunch. So the classic there, social media is much maligned, in my view, quite rightly in many cases. For the age group that broadly I can see in this room, which I'm a member of, LinkedIn is a very, very good platform, incredibly good platform. Facebook, Twitter, and the other 80 names I can't remember, all wonderful, and certainly Facebook is great for a consumer business. But it's like this: whatever you say on social media If you wanted to say something to one of your top 5 customers, something that mattered, something that actually mattered, put that on social media. Don't put a certain consultancy I won't mention, certainly not one of our competitors, but the post just said, Peroni, and had a picture of some dude having lunch at the Viaduct. Now, who on earth wants to know that he just had a beer? I mean, to me, the message there is, I've got so much ego, I want to tell you that I've had a beer. And saying, well, hold on, where's the value in that? So be very careful with social media, but this whole digital side of things, the good news is that there are bright young things, they usually are fairly young and pretty bright, who can package all this up for not much money and make sense of all of this for you. But if you avoid it, when you come to sell down your business, you'll get sold all for it. That's a precise technical term. So here we go. The purchaser of your business won't pay what it's worth unless there's clear documented evidence that revenue streams are either driven or at minimum supported by quality digital marketing. Welcome to 2017. Now, the genesis of that was a guy called Gates, who in I think it was 1999, it might have been 98, he wrote a book called Business at the Speed of Thought. Some of the people in this room might have read it, but don't bother reading it now because we're living it. We're absolutely living it. And we all need to understand that this is in the heads of our target market of any market. The genie's out of the bottle, not quite a genie. So it's applied common sense, this whole digital marketing, really. What is your business about? Can it be clear? I'll just give you a little semi-psychological term that a good mate of mine said to me one day. He said, Murray, simplicity is the only thing that has a chance of being positively interpreted. Complexity is always negatively interpreted. Isn't that kind of a cut through? And the trouble with the professions, bless them, obviously not you guys, but certainly with accounting and law and a few other professions, the more complicated they can make it apparently, the better. But about 6 or 7 years ago, I went to a particular function and a retiring, highly successful business person said the following, which has stayed with me and I wanted to share with you today. They said, look, somebody said to them, look, what's success? What do you think success is in business, and how do you attract and maintain customers? And this person said, well, it's about 3 words in the following order: affability, accessibility, and ability. Affability. People do business with you if they like you or if they trust you. Trust is fine. Liking is interesting. It's really, traditionally what it is somebody, you don't rub somebody up the wrong way. It's not necessarily liking, but there's certainly some kind of connection there. So that's affability. The next thing is accessibility. If they think you're okay, and they call you on a day, a week, a month, a year, 5 years, and they can't get hold of you, on to someone else. Affability, accessibility, and only then is ability. And what this person said, he drew up a triangle, a pyramid. He said the trouble with professions in particular is they think it's the other way around. They're so damn smart, everybody will want to deal with them. Of course they're smart. They're incredibly smart. Why doesn't everybody know they're so smart? But when you think about this dude, I think he probably he was onto something. So, clearly demonstrated and integrated into your business. Not like the guy who's apparently walks in front of the Queen about 10 feet or 30 feet ahead painting. Apparently all she can ever smell is paint because they were forever sort of painting in front of her. It's not hanging the pictures because somebody's coming. It's actually how it is. Now, if that hasn't got your attention, hopefully this one might. the value gap of digital marketing versus not. I'm going to throw a slightly numeric term at everybody and let's see where we get to. Question: would everybody here like to double their business revenue in 5 years? Anybody, any show of hands, anyone like to do that? Well, what average increase on a percentage basis per annum would you need to achieve to double over 5 years? Anybody know? You don't have to, it's not exact. And it's actually called a CAG, it's a cumulative average growth, CAG. So I'll put you out of your misery, it's 15%. So if you go home tonight with an Excel spreadsheet and you start with $100,000 and you go 1.15, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you'll find at the end of 5 years you've doubled. Does that surprise anybody? The trick is you've got to do it every year. A lot of people in business will go, oh, I'm going to double my business in a year, or double it in 3 years, 5 years, but they haven't got a clue on what it actually means. It's not actually that hard. Funnily enough, the harder part is to double your profit as well as your revenue, but that's another story. So here's a little Excel spreadsheet, and it's a tale of two businesses. The business at the top does grow by 15% per annum. And my proposition is because they're using digital marketing. Interestingly, when I look at my current book of clients and I think about the last 4 years, and I'm pretty good with all of their numbers, that's not too far away. There's obviously some pluses and minuses. Some businesses grow 100% in a year, but the point I'm making is this, and hopefully everybody will have access to these slides, so I'm not going to give anybody an accounting lecture or a numeric lecture. The top business grows by 15% a year, the bottom one declines by 15% a year. And in this case, the multiple, I've talked about a multiple before of 5, this one is 4. So let's just look at it from 17 to 19, with one going up 15, the other going down. One business is worth half of the other. How on earth could that happen? The answer is very, very easily. Very easily. All that's happened here is that the revenue has gone up, and the top one down on the bottom, and the rest is history. The multiplier is the same. I might add that bottom one, the multiplier actually wouldn't be the same, the multiplier would be worse. But I've kept this deliberately simple just to let you know that revenue is very important. So if you come back, for example, to, let's say you treat yourself like a chartered accounting practice, it's just an example, it's probably a reasonable one. If you've got, if you're doing, say, 500,000 revenue in a year, and over 5 years, you do your 15% CAG, so you've got $1 million revenue, and if your practice would sell at 80 cents in the dollar, what have you done? You've doubled the price of your practice, haven't you? You've gone from 80% of half a mil to 80% of a mil. There's also other things I don't want to get into too much, but there's a premium for control. In a business, if you had a business and bought it, you'd have to pay a little more than if there were two mates who bought half each. That's human nature, actually, there. So $100,000 for some people can be a good business. $1 million for other people could be useless. The question is, what is it for you guys? If you're not able to protect your revenue and come up with some kind of multiplier, and people like ourselves and others know these things because that's our business. This is basically how it works. Now the other way, I haven't got a picture of it, but it's the ostrich way, which is, oh, sod it, it's all too hard, I'll just put my head in the sand and I'll keep going till I drop. Now just on that, I'll mention a name business, and anything I mention will be public record, but you can connect the dots. There's a very well-known business called Douglas Pharmaceuticals. They're large. It was in the paper, their revenue's around 190 million. Very good business. And Sir Graham Douglas, who founded that, recently died. His son is in that business. Also, it was public knowledge that they went out at some stage a couple of years ago and looked at selling the business. I'm just giving a little bit of background there, because it would have applied to them. They haven't sold, as it happens, but there's research in New Zealand, in Australia, Australasia, and every Western world country that if somebody has to sell their business under duress, they'll leak 35% of value. It's about 35, a third will go. So that's the value of planning straight up. It's expensive to put one's head in the sand unless you're planning on living forever and working forever. Or unless you're planning and saying, okay, well, sod it, I'll just shut the thing down. I've got my nest egg. I'll retire to Tauranga, that well-known suburb of Auckland, bless them, lovely place, and I'll cash my chips up and get my $1 or $2 or $3 million house and stick a couple of mil in the bank, and which is happening a lot, I might add, and it's usually happening because people haven't looked at this stuff and go, oh, look, it's just too hard, so I'll shut the damn thing down. Never liked accountants anyway, or anyone that values this stuff. I'm getting stuck into accountants, aren't I? That's because I'm a reformed one. Still a member of the Institute, but heavily reformed. So now we get into, I'd like to think I was anyway. Now we get into ways to exit, ways to get out, or ways to sell down. And here we've got the usual suspects: competitor, supplier, customer, someone we don't know, unrelated, someone in your business. Perish the thought, a member of your family. I only say that because that can be very, very interesting. It's called mixing blood and water. Blood being family, of course, in case anyone's wondering. A partial or complete buyout of key staff, form a franchise, wouldn't recommend it, or a licensee. That's quite complicated. Split it up or just close it down. Now, there's a lot of activity in New Zealand at the moment around succession, and a lot of businesses in New Zealand, certainly in the SME space, which I defined earlier at 80 mil and below, which have got family in them. I'm not negative to family. We've all got families, and it can be fantastic, and there are some superb family businesses around, and some of you may have family in your business. Just don't mix personal and business, because when it comes to a business transaction, it's got to be separate. I'm working with a family group at the moment and assisting blood and water to work together, which is interesting and positive. But the first gig was actually there were two families, and 10 years ago there were two guys. One of the guys died, had a nasty disease, and he died. And so there was the surviving fellow and his widow. The surviving fellow could have legally, not morally, but legally and commercially done all sorts of bad commercial things to the widow, and he never did. He played with a straight bat. The widow knew nothing about business. So my gig was to come in and get the business valued, because the two families had known each other for 47 years and been in business for 25. That took 10 months. There were 14 different stakeholders across two families. And it took 10 months to agree a figure, which sounds a long time, but it actually isn't. And they agreed a deal. There was a matriarch, the widow, and a patriarch, and got them in a room, got the families in breakout rooms, got it all done. And then I said, well, who's going to document it? Because I do a lot of work with lawyers and accountants for my sins. And they said, no, we'll do that. I said, look, it'll take you 10 months. I'll do it for you, I'll do it in a month. Anyway, they did it themselves. Guess what? It took them 10 months because the lawyers had something to argue over. So we need to be quite careful in these areas, because they're not areas that any of us work in. Every day we're working with clients and doing all that stuff. That's working on the business and a little bit in. This area is sort of somewhere over there. So in terms of who likely possible people are, here are some things to think about. How are we off for time?
We'll probably got another 10 minutes.
Okay, that's cool.
We're late starting.
No, that's cool. So when you look at family, Are they willing? I could tell you lots of stories and won't about unwilling sons and daughters or willing sons and daughters. The next question is, if they are willing, are they actually competent? And have you got the intestinal fortitude to have a discussion with a member of your family that they're actually, unfortunately, not competent? This is where we get into some interesting areas. If they are competent and willing, are they committed? Or do they think they'll sort of swan in every now and again and blow some cigar smoke and drive a Ferrari, to be deliberately out there? And are they managers? Do they actually understand the hard grind before you get to the good stuff within a business? So, and it's really hard to have the conversations which are fairly easy with somebody who isn't a member of your family. Quite often people like ourselves get brought in to have those conversations because it's a little bit difficult sometimes for the family members to do so, or they need to be facilitated. So an internal sale, you've got people in your business who don't own it and appears they may want to own it. Are they competent? Most importantly, can they afford it? Has everybody here heard of the term, I'm sure you would have, vendor finance? Leaving some money in? Yes, well, anyone who does that would need to document it well, because leaving money in means an expectation of getting it out. The other interesting one is, will other staff allow it? So I didn't ask for a show of hands in terms of size of business within this room, but if you had yourself and you had, say, 3 people in the business working for you, and you had one person who was implacably opposed to anyone other than you ever doing anything, all sorts of interesting things can occur there, not all of which would appear to be controllable. This internal party, so are they serious? Are they competent? Can they afford it? Will the other staff come on board with it? And therefore, are they serious? And then you've got the last lot, the external, the people you don't know. You might know of them, but you don't know them. First thing, are they honest? Be very careful on that. Can they afford it? So what's reasonable? And will they protect your staff? Do you care? Do they care? You can see some quite important questions come up when we look at all this stuff. You guessed it, planning. Fail to plan, plan to fail. This is just a little slide. It'll be September soon. Here we are. What are we going to do about our branding? I talked about earlier, if you're Murray Fulton Inc., is that where you need to be? If you're looking to exit your business, to say in 10 years, I wouldn't recommend brown paper bag, but it could be, who knows, it could be all sorts of names. Has anybody here ever read anything or talked to anybody about the power of a brand? Does anybody here any kind of view on whether a brand is powerful? Why would a brand be powerful? It's actually all about perception. Anybody here like cars? Probably be a number of people that hate them as well, and they're probably all both intelligent. But if you think about from another premium brand, think about, say, BMW and Mercedes-Benz. For anyone who's interested in cars, have you ever seen a brand new top spec BMW with something that says 30% discount, you can have it? You ever seen that? What you will see is run out special loaded goodies, $15,000 worth of flash wheels and this, that and the other. And the reason that you see that is that a premium brand never uses price as a strategy to move product, ever. It just doesn't. Because the people in that area of the market are smart enough to know that it's not about price. One of the reasons, I don't know how many people here drive a BMW, I'm not one of them, but I like my cars. A BMW or a Mercedes has got a position of status. That's why one of the reasons people will pay for it. It may or may not be quality. Who knows if they're right or wrong? So branding's really important. Systems are absolutely critical. No systems, no business. The better documented the systems are, the less discomfort a purchaser will have. In the end, it's really, really simple. If you've got a business that's a good business, it's understandable, it's got a track record, and it's got good systems and good people, that's going to go for a good price. Just think of it as, say, just pick your favourite suburb or suburbs, and whatever that is. You've got two properties, they're both quite similar. One of them is really well maintained, it's fresh, it's up to date. The other one is a dog. There's a whole lot of stuff wrong with it. It's been abused, or it certainly hasn't been loved. That second one will trade at about a 30% discount to the first one, at least, if not more. And I'm not talking about a mortgagee sale. So systems, past clients to staff, if you want to have a business which isn't reliant on you, then that's something you may need to have a look at. Tune profitability. Take all the private stuff that you're putting through your books out. A, it'll increase the profit, and B, it'll make sure that it'll send a message that your business isn't actually your hobby. If you can, buy out shareholders. And what I mean by that, if they're not up for the journey, better off that you take them out by having a discussion, because as I said earlier, you'll get a premium price for control. If you can say, look, here's my business, there you go, that's my business. $1 million and here's why. It's understandable. If I started taking this thing apart, the first thing you'd be wondering if it will still actually work. Not sure it will after that, but hopefully it will. Pay off loans and HP, that's called tidying up the balance sheet. Nobody wants to take over your debt. Get rid of that. Hire a manager is an interesting one. Putting your business under management is something that's going to take probably 10 years. Usually the first person fails, often through the owner. It's going to take 2 or 3 such people. If you're lucky, you'll get it right on the second time. It's usually the third time. So the hiring a manager, anybody who says that, I'm going to sell my business in a year and hire a manager, they're going to get a low price. And then the happy future, in this case 2 years, that's a pretty short period of time, sell for some figure. I've put in 1.5 million, which is hopefully enough to get your retention, whatever it actually is, and retain key people. So look, this whole area, frankly, ladies and gentlemen, it's fraught. It's quite doable, but it's really, in my opinion, selling a business is kind of like having a family and growing. You put a fair bit into it. So one of the things you need to think about with this is my business my baby, or is it actually an economic asset? Or is it basically, if I bought myself a job, which I call a business, and if that's the case, it's not a problem. It certainly beats working for someone else usually. But I think the whole point here is that the thing that's a little bit confronting in this area is you say to yourself, well, actually, have I got a business? Have I actually got a business that's worth anything to anyone else? Maybe I'm not sure. The thing about that, if you're not sure, speak to a professional, because you'll probably get an answer which you'll either like or not like. So that's the end of my presentation, almost. Simple steps work best. Don't try and do it all at once. If you are relaunching and rebranding, don't talk about exit, obviously. Look at your key people. Delegate customer decision making to key people if you've got them, if you want to actually get out. Otherwise, it will simply be saying, well, I've got all my clients and somehow I'll give them to you. That's a great indicator of a hobby business. And in terms of supplier and stock responsibilities, we heard from a supplier earlier, those relationships are key and they need to be managed well. They need to be managed well also. That's me. But really what I'd like to do is, in the time we've got left, a couple of minutes, take any questions. I wanted a bit longer. Questions, it always seems to be this way, but has anyone got any comments or questions to try and make this area a little bit clearer? Hello.
Murray, thank you for that. What do business consultants charge in your position?
It's a very simple answer to that. The charge is, in the case of my business, Advantage, it's literally tailored. It's tailored to the circumstances of the person. It's not an hourly rate. It can be anything from quite a low charge to quite a high one, depending upon what is involved, depending on what the outcome is. So literally, every pricing decision in Advantage business is looked at case by case. And the only way we get business, just to let you know, be the same as you, is if we deliver excellent value. So you'll find the same in terms of forgetting about Advantage for a minute, in this whole area of getting value. That's how it is. It's all around circumstances. Interesting question. Thank you for that. Hopefully that's not the only one. Has anyone else got any questions?
Do you work with any other designers or architects in selling their practices?
Yes.
How do they generally compare to other professions?
Oh, very similar actually.
Yeah.
Very similar. The professions, the ones that I mentioned, others are actually quite similar because in the end they are selling either time or blocks of time or expertise for value. Look, scratch all of us, we'll all bleed.
Just something different, Murray. How common is it for people that have got rental units, they run them as a business? How common is it for them to want to sell those as a portfolio? Is that normally the case, rather than selling them off all individually? How often do you come across someone that will just want to sell the whole lot as one package?
That's an interesting question. It's a beautiful U-turn from this, but I think I'll answer that in two ways. A number of business, I'll be slightly oblique in there, I'll give you a direct answer. There is no right or wrong answer with that. It's really, if you look at piecemeal altogether, it's around yield and it's around how much somebody wants to release in terms of capital. That's a really quite a specialised area, and it would deserve its own presentation.
So I'm wondering whether or not if you'd get more by selling them as a portfolio rather than individually.
Unfortunately, the answer is yes and no because it depends on the circumstances. But one thing I'd like to take out of that, but I'm sure a number of people here would be in the position, a number of people who've been in business a while, they own their own premises. Some don't. Those that do, banks love people like that because they do, because they think they're quite committed. People who don't get into all of this and work hard usually earn more money out of their property than their business. Not always. A well-run entity will be about even, actually. But the thing about it is, if any of you are in that situation, what I'd recommend is to have your building, if you like, your premises in a separate company charging market rent to the operating business. Because when things get tough, and I'm sure all of us can very well remember, if not the 87 crash, certainly 08, 09, 10, when even banks couldn't get money off each other. Apparently in the G7 all got some multi-billion-dollar IOUs and said, well, here you go, I'll do this and do that. And people were starved for cash. What they did was they took a rental holiday off their own asset. It's a really good thing to do. And it's common right across New Zealand to do that. So in terms of property, as you talked about, property is a fantastic thing. It's a little less leverageable now than it was. But any of us can have a look at the long-term trends. And property, certainly in my lifetime, the business lifetime, hasn't gone down. But don't be one of those people that earns nothing out of your business when you sell and you're looking for your property gain. Try and get bites of both cherries. Is that about us?
Thank you very much, Murray.
Oh, thank you.